Hi everyone, I'm Partha Das, the Executive Director of C2HR, and I'm excited to invite you to today's latest installment of our HR Learning Series. Today's topic is focused on workforce compliance. As organizations are managing changes in regulations, new technologies, and the evolving ways in which we work, our speakers will share updates on regulations and policies to help our community navigate workforce compliance. The next slide. C2HR is able to offer free quality educational programs for our members, like today's learning series, thanks to the generous support of our 2025 sponsors, including Deloitte. We sincerely appreciate your support. The next slide. Before we start today's session, we want to invite you to join us for Coffee and Convo on October the 8th, where we will have an interactive discussion on wellness and how to maintain boundaries. To register, please visit our website, c2hr.org. We would like today's webinar to be interactive and invite you to post questions and comments in the Q&A box throughout the discussion. SHRM has approved this webinar for 1 CE credit, and the credit code will be emailed to all participants after the event. And now I'd like to turn it over to Abel and thank everyone from Deloitte for sharing the information with us today. Abel?
Thanks, Parthavi. Hey, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Abel Sum. I'm a partner at Deloitte in our human capital practice, and I work with media, sports, entertainment companies on all things HR, talent, learning, development, change, etc. And I believe I met some of you or connected with some of you at the conference back in late July. Want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today for the webinar that's titled Navigating Workforce Compliance in 2025 and Beyond. Very relevant topic. I know that the team here and I get questions about workforce compliance all the time. And so hopefully that during today's session, we will provide you with sort of an overview of key regulations and some of the strategic implications on the workforce and the solutions. Today's session to Parthavi is, as said, is brought to you by C2HR. My colleagues here, who is much smarter than me, Rain, Calpita, and Damien, and Grace, are also from our Deloitte Consulting Human Capital practice. Will be taking us through the content. And as a quick reminder, this information that we're going to talk through is for educational and informational purposes only. We'll definitely hope you have good takeaways and some moments of learning from today's session. But I just wanted to be clear that like Deloitte Consulting is not a law firm. We do not practice law. And so the information you get today should not be construed as legal advice. But with that in mind, in that context, I'll hand it over to Damien to kick it off.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Abel. So briefly, before we get into the session, I wanted to take a moment and tell you a little bit about the workforce compliance and risk team within Deloitte, what we do and why we are talking to you today. So we are a team that focuses primarily on the impact that employment regulations have on a company's operations and administrations. We bring a specialized strategic and technical lens to policies, processes, and procedures. Today, I have two of my amazing colleagues from the Deloitte Workforce Compliance and Risk team with me. The first is Reem Jano. She leads our practice and she's got over 20 years of experience driving employment engagement, compliance, operational excellence topics. We also have Kalpita Ainapur, a fellow senior manager whose expertise is in designing effective HR compliance programs and policies that align with regulatory requirements. And rounding up the team is myself, Damien Wallach. My expertise lies in technology, innovation, and HR compliance, including AI. Before we get into the session, we're going to do a quick poll and get a pulse on what you're most interested in learning about today. I think we've got the first polling question up. Still have answers trickling in. I'll give everyone a couple of more moments to enter the responses. And while we do that, a few quick housekeeping notes. Throughout the session, please drop your questions in the Q&A box. Let us know if it's visible there. We'll cover as many as possible throughout the session and at the end. The webinar is being recorded. The C2 HR team will be sharing replay afterwards, and the recording will be published on the site for future access. Let's see if we've got, oh yeah, great. We've got the results of the poll. Rim, I'll pass it on to you. Looks
Awesome, Damien. Thank you. And appreciate everyone's participation in the poll. I'm just taking a quick look. Not surprisingly, our favorite topic, which we're keeping till the end, is AI. But it looks like pay transparency gets no love today in this poll. So really love hearing what everyone's looking to talk about. We typically do these types of updates on a biannually basis across our client base. And to be honest, sometimes we're scrambling around about what information we're going to hit on, how we're going to fill the time allotted. That certainly has not been the case in 2025. It was more around what can we exclude, just because there's so much going on now and so much that's impacting employers across the country and around the world. And so many things happening from an HR and regulatory and employment law perspective. So I won't waste too much time. I'll dig right in and cover the information that we'd like to talk about. And we'll also like to save some time at the end for some Q&A. As Damien mentioned, if there's any burning questions around any of these topics as we're discussing them, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and we'll try to address it live versus staying to the end. From a high level, what we're looking to cover this afternoon, first we'll be talking briefly about the One Big Beautiful Bill. We'll talk about what's going on at the federal government. We'll also talk at the state level and go over some of the state laws that took into effect recently. And we'll hit upon, as we saw with the poll, everyone's favorite topic, AI and the growing role of AI and in employment decisions and the landscape that surrounds that. And then we'll close out with an HR employer checklist. So what are some of the things that you can be doing now to help prepare you for the last quarter of 2025? It's sort of crazy to think that we're nearing the end of 2025 and as you head into 2026. So let's shift to our second poll. I just want to gauge people's familiarity and comfortability with the Big Beautiful Bill. Okay.
I think we still have some responses rolling in. So let's give it a few more seconds.
Okay. We're not going to dig too deep into the Big Beautiful Bill today. We're just going to touch upon it. We really just want to get a gauge.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So definitely a lot about uncertainty out there. No surprise. There's a lot to it. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of legislation. So that being said, we're going to do an overview now. We'll also have Deloitte also having a dedicated session just on this bill next month. So today we'll do a high-level overview, what's in the bill that's HR specific and employment relevant. So in terms of the current HR headlines as we see it, I would bucket out as the Big Beautiful Bill is number one. The second, which is apparently everyone's least favorite topic, pay transparency. I will say it's really starting to grow in a number of states. New Jersey, Vermont, Massachusetts are the big three right now. There's also a lot going on in the EU in this space. Number three, I would say, is the courts. Every day when you turn on the TV to open up a newspaper, hop online, whatever it is, you're seeing a new ruling that is either blocking something or overturning something that's announced. It's just constant change. And like essentially the way I equate it is really it's like a tennis match that's really hard to keep up with, which is really interesting in this community because I think historically we've leaned in on the fact of whatever regulations are coming out and we lean on that. But like the courts is something that we're also telling clients that you really have to keep a good eye on. And the fourth being everyone's favorite topic, artificial intelligence. It continues to be the hot and growing topic area. One thing that was cut from the Big Beautiful Bill was the restriction of states from passing their own AI regulations. So what that means is it was originally in the Big Beautiful Bill that it would try to manage states on what they passed in regards to AI. So what that means is you can expect to see more and more states adopt some type of AI regulation, and even those at the local level. You're likely to see that more in 2026. When we talk about this a little bit more later this afternoon, you'll hear us reference the fact that we're calling it a little bit, and it's known in the community as like the wild, wild west. And we say that is because with the states taking the charge, there's really a lack of consistency, which is causing a lot of challenges from an operational perspective, because you have to manage multiple regulations across the board and thinking about how do you actually administer that. Okay, so let's dive into federal compliance updates. And as I mentioned, in terms of the Big Beautiful Bill, it really introduces new tax rules that will trickle down to payroll coding and W-2 reporting. While we're still waiting on detailed guidance from the regulators, it's important to start really preparing now by reviewing your current practices within your payroll reporting and filing systems. I think that's where we'll see the biggest impact from like an administrative perspective. So our clients are starting to think through what does that look like, what needs to be updated, how to really work between the intersections between their HR systems and tax. Let's next talk about the overtime thresholds. So under FLSA, as of January 1st of this year, the salary threshold for exempt administrative and professional employees increased to 1,128 per week. And the threshold for highly compensated employees moved to $151,164 annually. So this means that more positions will need to be reclassified as non-exempt, or you have to bump the pay of those positions. And which with these things can, usually impact your payroll systems and your timekeeping processes. And the automatic updates to these thresholds will begin in 2027. So this is really critical. We're seeing a lot of this from an administrative standpoint, and then just really going in and trying to think through the classifications of your employees and your payroll practices. Another critical update is the independent contractor test. The DOL's six-factor economic factor rule, which was effective during the Biden administration sometime in March of 2024, remains the key standard for determining workers' classification. So this rule really includes the likelihood that some contractors may be reclassified as employees, which could have significant impact from a wage and hour compliance perspective. There is good news because I'm not the bearer of completely bad news. One good news for employers is that the paid program has been reinstated. And as some of you may be aware, this program allows employers to voluntarily self-report and resolve any wage and FMLA violations. So it's a great opportunity for businesses to correct mistakes efficiently while avoiding litigation. So just something to think through. I know paid, the classification, employer classification is like not an area that a lot of people love focusing in on, but we definitely see from a regulator perspective is something in the horizon that is going to be big in 2026. And then finally, as we all know, there are new executive orders coming out very frequently, and that the president recently signed what could potentially influence how businesses use AI. And this is a key area to really stay vigilant around keeping up with updates. Any passive non-compliant increases in your exposure to audits, lawsuits, and like back pay can really often lead to wage and hour litigation spikes after those, like any of these changes come through. I wanted to pause to see if anyone had any like specific questions around this before we keep diving in. So.
Yeah. Reem, the updates you just walked us through, I think highlight really the importance of staying proactive and informed. So many changes. Kalpita, did you want to add anything here? How these changes might impact businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Reem mentioned, all of these changes really underscore the need for organizations to have robust processes or tools that allow you to stay on top of these complex and consistently evolving requirements. The other challenge is, so what do you do with all of these regulations and thinking about all the upstream and downstream actions that you have to take to remain in compliance? This can range from staying on top of your policies, your procedures, all the way to making sure that your processes from a payroll, HRIS system perspective are also updated and keep up with these changes as well. At the end of the day, while a lot of these changes and updates might be driven by HR, they do have broader business outcomes and broader business impacts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kalpita, Reem, this was great. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the executive orders we've seen come through since January. Kalpita?
Sorry, I'm on mute again. All right. Happy to share that. So if you've been following the news, I mean, you've probably noticed a wave of executive orders this year, many of which have really impacted employment and HR issues. The first one that I want to kind of touch on is around DEI. There's been executive orders. One of the first ones that kind of came out was around shutting down DEI programs in the federal government and agencies and really putting restrictions on federal contractors. While there's really nothing in there yet around targeting private employers, agencies like the EEOC have been directed to keep an eye out for any practices that might be considered discriminatory. So if you have any DEI programs and even though you're not a federal contractor, it's still a good idea to kind of take another look at all of your policies, or especially the ones around your DEI programs, and make sure that you're not opening yourself up to any unwanted risk or any unwanted publicity. There's also been a flurry of activity, and Reem alluded to this earlier, around the AI front, as President Trump's new executive order rolled back some of the prior order under President Biden, which had set up guardrails for AI around safety testing and transparency and around use of AI. The focus now with the updated executive order is less on federal oversight and more around speeding up AI development and use. And then for anyone out there that has and hires a lot of visa workers, you've also probably seen that that process is starting to get tougher. There's stricter vetting and higher qualification standards that are coming into play under this administration. So you should expect more delays and possibly more denials for those types of workers as you're bringing them on. These changes can impact, business operations, project timelines, and overall stability. So we also kind of suggest that our clients keep an eye out for workforce planning as they kind of think about all of this.
Yeah, Kalpita, I think this is such a hot topic. Can you expand a little bit on the area of work authorization?
Yeah.
Can you speak to trends we are seeing right now around immigration and work authorization?
Yeah, absolutely. Immigration and work authorization, as you said, Damien, are really hot topics. We have been getting an influx of questions from our clients around this, and it continues to get more complicated. And there are some big changes coming ahead. One major trend that we're seeing is the push for more states to expand E-Verify requirements. Over a dozen states at this point are looking at stricter rules like higher penalties or lowering thresholds for when employers have to use E-Verify. As of 2025, I think as of right now, there's about 6 states that do require E-Verify for both public and private employers. On top of that, E-Verify also recently introduced a new status change report feature. I think it was launched about a month or two ago. that really helps employers track employees whose employment authorization documents have been revoked or expired. This report is supposed to be updated regularly and provides real-time information with the intent of making it easier for employers to identify any workers who may no longer be authorized to work in the US. If an employer misses an update and continues to employ someone whose work authorization has been revoked, they could face potential fines under ICE or I-9 violations, or knowingly employing any unauthorized workers. So in these cases, criminal charges could apply. So it's just really important to kind of stay on top of this front, especially. And overall, the bottom line here is really that immigration and work authorization rules are changing very quickly, and the regular updates and training and staying on top of this is really essential.
So, Kelpita, I'm sure you're seeing this too. I think this is probably one of the hottest topics that is slowly creeping up. So, under this current administration, I think that we've seen an increase of I-9 verification audits in general. So, individuals that have been in this HR space for a while, we're pretty used to I-9 verification. It's somewhat of a seamless process, we think, and more from an audit perspective. But we've seen data that I think it's at least three to four times it's increased the amount of I-9 audits that are occurring. It's being used in a way to validate for ICE. And then I would also say another area they're saying is they're using it for fines. So certain things, like even if you're using third-party vendors for this, we would highly recommend that you do like an internal pulse check and audit around your processes. We've seen instances where organizations are getting penalized for just basic things such as like not using the appropriate documentation or not being clear around the documentation that they're using, including licenses where they've indicated instances where it's been like falsified. And typically when you think of like work authorization and like especially in the I-9 space, you always think about the traditional workforce, right? What we've also seen an increase is when you use contingent workers, even when you're using a third-party vendor and that vendor has the liability of who they onboard. We've seen instances where there's been an impact to the business activity because ICE has come in and has noted undocumented workers. And then as a result, it impacts your business and then the contracts that go through it. So I would say that this is a hotter topic than most would have anticipated. And it slowly seems to be creeping up. And there's instances around it, especially from like a visa perspective too.
Yeah, this is super important stuff, being Kalpita. It sounds like managing the immigration compliance and just worker authorization compliance requires really, really centralized systems and robust processes. What seems to be really effective is a central HR and compliance function that monitors and updates state by state e-verify requirements. We're seeing also another good practice is to use onboarding platforms that can flag e-verify requirements. As you said, Reem, based on workers, location, and employment type, right? Employers should also maintain clear documentation, right? Distinguishing between the employees and contractors. As you've mentioned, Reem, misclassification, right, could be an issue and can lead to compliance failures. Lastly, employers should train HR and hiring managers on the evolving state laws. And something else that you've mentioned earlier, right? Periodic audits to ensure that ongoing compliance is part of the process. Anything else to add there, Reem, Kalpita, on this topic? Very important topic. If not, we can move on to our next slide and talk about wage law updates and pay transparency. But before we move to this topic, let me check if we've got any questions coming in and then run a quick poll. Should we start with the poll and then do the questions? Because the poll is already up. Let's do the poll.
This was like the least exciting topic everyone had, right? So I think we do have some QA questions. Yeah.
Let's look at the questions. Yeah. You do
Yeah,
have.
yeah, I would agree with this comment. Like, make sure your house is in order right now. I can't reiterate enough how important that is, right? And again, I say this about like this, and we call it employment verification versus I-9 audits because we want to make sure it's broader and it's not just your traditional workforce, but it's also any contingent or independent contractors. This is going to be hot, or hotter than you're seeing right now. So you just don't want to end up in the news, and be set an example. And that's the thing, is it's not just about the fines, it's like about your reputation and brand. Um, so we can't emphasize enough how important this one is. All right. And then I know we had a polling question around pay transparency. So I think that's
The
still
results are up. Yeah, the results are up.
okay. Take an approach to address pay transfer, but still refining our approach. So it seems like everyone's comfortable about it. Okay. So I would say, and the reason why we do think that it's a hot topic, it's very similar, and I think this is something that is a theme across the board, is the fact that states are increasingly adopting new regs and rules that they don't see the federal government taking. Okay. So and I feel like we're going to have enough time to talk about AI, and it's going to be so much fun when we talk about it. But like, I think in general, one area we're not talking about is like sick leave and paid leave. That's so hot on the state level too, because so many organizations, like there's nothing being done at the federal level. So we would say that like wage law updates are another hot area because the states are just creeping up. So if you think about it, like 9 states have adopted pay range disclosure requirements for job postings. Their effective dates have staggered throughout 2025 and 2026. These regulations are really aimed to promote pay transparency. But I would also say what we're starting to sort of notice in some of the states is that it's also trying to address pay equity, right? So it's another way of trying to get around some of the deregulation that we've seen on the federal level when it comes to DEI. Okay. So it adds that level of complexity that we historically haven't really thought about. In addition, I would say over 20 states have increased the minimum wage since 2024, and several more to come out before 2026. So this is an area we won't, just because you all said you didn't really love this one, we won't dig too deep into it. But I would definitely say that you should keep an eye out on it, because what we're seeing is that embedment of DEI that comes in, and then there's going to be that push and pull from the federal government that you have to be thinking about, and some of the inconsistencies. And I think we've seen this historically between the IRS and the DOL, but now you're going to see that push and pull between federal and state.
Yeah, and Reem, that's a really great point. And I also want to just kind of add that as we're kind of thinking about pay transparency, that can also allude to PR, legal challenges as well. And especially when you're thinking about pay transparency, your job postings are really out there for everybody to see, right? And going back to that pay transparency thread for a second, and they really kind of show your pay practices, and all of that is kind of out there. And one of the things that we also kind of help and have been kind of advising our clients around is really thinking about those geodifferentials, right? Meaning like, how are you paying people fairly based on the work that they do and based on the location that they live? And that just kind of helps in terms of any changes that Reem is mentioning that are really happening at the state level, and helps you kind of keep up with that, even though it might be kind of challenging to set up the geodifferentials in the beginning, but it ultimately has proven to be a little bit easier from an operational standpoint in terms of managing all of these changes that are occurring, especially for multi-state employers.
Yeah. So Kelpita, I think those are all great points. And we often use the terminology of like, we're not attorneys, right? We're not here to practice law. But what we often say, think about things from an operational and administrative standpoint. So can you explain like how clients are thinking through these regulations and how they should be handling this?
Yeah, for pay transparency specifically, right? There's a need to kind of take a look at the wage indexation calendar. It's basically looking at conducting a regular review and adjusting employee pay based on things like inflation, cost of living, and market trends. And it really helps employers plan for those raises and manage costs from a budgetary standpoint. Again, it's another sort of mechanism or like a tool in your toolkit, right? Of being able to keep up with these state-specific pay transparency changes that are occurring across the board. And it also overall makes the process more transparent from an employee standpoint because they kind of expect when those reviews could be coming, and it overall just kind of helps create trust and keeps things clear. All right. Moving on to everyone's kind of favorite growing topic these days, the role of AI in employment decisions. If we could shift to the next slide, Damien, I'll hand it to you.
Fantastic. Yes, AI. There's so much that is happening with AI. AI, of course, is dramatically transforming the workplace, right? How employees are performing their work, but also how we are addressing HR processes. So that AI transformation really brings about significant obligation on employers to pay way more attention to the new laws, regulations that are coming out. Rima and Kalpita mentioned a couple of times that this is an interesting space where with this limited or no unified federal law, the states are and cities sometimes are creating their own rules. And this is making the AI compliance a little bit more complex, especially for multi-state employers.
Yeah.
Kalpita mentioned earlier, we are seeing less focus on the federal oversight and risk mitigation, more on promoting rapid AI development and deployment. Local regulators are stepping in to fill the gaps and creates a patchwork of laws. We've got a couple of examples of regulations that you probably are familiar with. And by the way, Kalpita, Reem, jump in, stop me at any point if there's anything that sparks your interest or you want to add a color.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something before we started jumping in, Damon, because
Awesome.
I mean, you and I can talk about this topic for hours. So we love it. And I love the fact that everybody was really excited to hear about this, right? But I think you said something that I really just want to like pull the thread on a little bit, right? Without federal legislation, is what you said, is that there's like a patchwork of state level like AI regulations that are
Mhm.
emerging across the US, which is to my earlier point, creating an environment that like some have doubled like the wild, wild west. And the reason why it's dubbed that way is because it's fragmented. There's a fragmented regulatory landscape that's happening right now that is going to raise compliance challenges for businesses. But it also allows the states to really like serve in that role of being like laboratories of democracy for AI governance. Now, I know that we're gonna dig in a little bit now with you to talk about like some of the federal AI laws that are coming through and what we need to be thinking about. But what I wanted to also highlight is that there are what I think ends up being a tough challenge right now with a lot of the state stuff is that a lot of organizations sometimes are taking this like literally in regards to AI regulations. And what you also have to remember is that there are a lot of federal regulations that are impacted that have existed, like the EEOC, and things as such around like discrimination and anti-discrimination regulations that you need to be taking into consideration as you use AI tools. Like you need to make sure that the tools that you're using also adheres to those regulations. Like for example, if you're using algorithms for your job descriptions or anything, related to that, that there is not some type of like unconscious bias that's happening because the person that is setting the algorithms, I apologize for my wording today, might not be applying them appropriately. So it's making sure you look at it from both those lenses. Like, what are the AI regulations that are coming out right now, very fast and quick from the state level? And then also, how do those play into your regular regulations that are out? Okay. And how do you do business? And then also the funkiness, especially within this industry, is like, how does that play out across the board with your unions and your collective bargaining agreements, and then what you can and can't do? So I just wanted to keep that in the back of everyone's mind before like Damien started like jumping in.
Yeah, those are great points. I completely agree, Reem, with this sort of an overlap, right, of a sort of a higher level, right, higher order regulations pertaining to bias, right, and data protection, things like that, and then how this translates into the details, right, of what shows up on the state level. So, a few examples, just to make this conversation or this webinar a little bit more more specific. I want to quote a couple of examples of the regulations that you are probably very familiar with. Colorado has an AI state law that goes into effect in June 2026, next year. This law classifies most employment AI as high risk, right? The law will require reasonable care to prevent algorithmic discrimination. Very, very important. The law also talks about risk management policies. So another fun stuff to consider. Other example, effective January of next year, Illinois will require employers to notify applicants and employees when AI is used. Similarly to what's happening in Colorado, it also bans discriminatory AI use. And another example is an example of how cities can lead the way with certain targeted rules. So New York City rather, prohibits use of automated employment decision tools. Those are the AI tools, right? Unless they were independently audited for bias within the past year. So there's this condition. So we are prohibiting it unless they were reviewed independently for bias throughout the previous year.
Yeah.
This
Damien,
law, yes.
I just wanted to call out one. So I love that example you gave for New York City, because that was interesting because it was on the city level, right?
Mhm.
There was also one other reg that I wanted to call out, and it was probably going to be on your list, but I couldn't resist bringing up. But Tennessee passed the Elvis Act, and that was to protect musicians' voices and likeliness from unauthorized AI replication. So, like, every time you turn around, there's something new, and it could be specific to your industry, or it could be like broad, like engulfing. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to call that out.
No, that's a great example, right? And it actually goes or dives deeper, right, into a specific class, right, of employees or contractors or talent that is employed. So yeah, absolutely. Just one other thing about the New York City law, it will require, and this is similarly probably to what Colorado and Illinois will end up doing. It will require a notice and public summaries of how AI tools are used in hiring and promotions, right? So this also makes the importance, right, of explaining how AI is used and being fair about this, right, a critical point. So, but overall, those regulations seem to highlight key issues that regulators are paying attention to, and the risks associated with those issues. Again, as AI is used in HR, in employment, right? Those risks would be, related to bias in decision making, non-compliance with anti-discrimination laws, general laws, and also data protection, right? I've noticed that those are the three main points that we are seeing. So how can we mitigate those risks, right? Those big risks. It has been becoming apparent that we should start treating AI as a regulated process, right? And this means that I think everyone has to start thinking about creating a special AI compliance governance that covers multiple different components, right, of that ecosystem. Um, I've listed out, I'm looking at my notes right now, I've listed out a few really important points that I think everyone has to pay attention to. So within that AI compliance governance, we have to make sure that we are defining and tracking each AI use case, right? Again, this then connects really well with the state regulations, right? Where we have to explain how and why we are using AI. So the definition and the tracking of the AI is critical. Restricting access to the AI systems, right? So that not everybody can access and change the algorithms. Validating and controlling the AI models. The other thing is human in the loop still remains one of the most critical aspects of operating AI, right? So not fully automating critical employment decisions is key. And we sometimes, when we discuss how to use certain AI tools, right, in the HR processes, are discussing with our legal counsels how important is specification of where the human is involved, right, and to what extent it's checking and for quality control the outputs of what we've seen coming out of the AI. That a regulated process of AI use should also, of course, cover the bias audits, right? So we have to have a process of how to frequently check for the bias. And of course, assess and understand the impacts of using the AI as it pertains to bias. We keep saying this, but it's important to have our policies continuously updated. Reem, Kalpita, I've mentioned that we are seeing constantly new laws popping up. So making sure that the policies are updated and are then trickled down to managers, to hiring managers, to supervisors, and everyone's aware of what's happening. Throughout the whole process, we encourage everybody to continuously engage legal and technical experts, right, as you develop those AI use cases. Everyone will have a great input, right? And we have to pay attention not only to the algorithms, the technology behind it, but also the legality, right, of use. Maybe it's obvious, but very important, the scrutiny around data use, right? Data privacy protection measures that are also somehow intertwined with how the AI use case is set up. And of course, vendor assurance, critical piece, right? We often use external tools. So making sure that we are looking into that and making sure that they are also compliant with the regulations that apply to our cohorts, right, is critical. So as you can see, the AI compliance is becoming an increasingly interesting and increasingly complex space. Kalpita or Reem, do you want to maybe tackle how staffing can play a role in this as well?
Yeah, happy to. And actually, before I kind of answer that, I do want to emphasize that the interesting thing, especially around AI, is that a lot of the regulations that are coming out at the state and local level, right? So Damien mentioned New York City. So it's going to be really important to kind of keep an eye out for those city or locality specific regs that are also coming out with that. And then in terms of staffing, I agree that AI can certainly be a very important critical tool, especially when it comes to recruiting and onboarding folks. And it's really important that it gets used the right way, right? So a lot of times what we've been advising our clients, especially recently, is remember that even if you're using a third-party AI tool for hiring or screening candidates, it's still really important because you're still responsible for following all the anti-discrimination regulations and laws that still applies to you as the employer. If an AI tool ends up causing biased or unfair results, which I know we've all heard about, all the different ways that can happen in the news recently, it's still the employer and not just the vendor that's going to be on the hook for this. So it's really key that, as employers, that you're checking and you're monitoring these tools in terms of fairness and review their results on a periodic basis and make sure that everything kind of aligns with legal standards and requirements in the locations where you're either recruiting folks or where you have employees currently. Reem, I don't know if there's something that you wanted to add.
Um, So I think I would like to sort of shift back a little bit. So I guess we're seeing the key developments occurring, obviously in the US perspective from the state level. Um, I would be remiss to say that we're not seeing a lot coming out of the EU or within the labor union space, right? So if we think about in the US, like in the absence of like really comprehensive like federal AI law, we're seeing a lot of labor agreements coming out. So, like, as everyone knows, like the 2023 strike by WAG and SAG-AFTRA resulted in like a landmark contracts, like establishing really guardrails for AI use in the entertainment industry. Um, where like the WAG agreement or the WGA agreement, sorry, prohibits AI from like receiving writing credits and prevents companies from forcing writers to use AI in their work. Um, Also, like SAG-AFTRA agreement requires informed consent and fair compensation for using an actress likeness that includes voice and performance if it's been generated or altered by AI. We're seeing a lot that's coming out of the US Copyright Office around like human authorship. So I would definitely, this is where I find it like really interesting because you're seeing more of an increase really from like a labor's perspective. Um, a couple of other examples that we're seeing is like the Authors Guild is like providing, to Damien's earlier point around like governance and having guardrails, but they're providing like model clauses for authors to use in their contracts to prevent like publishers from using their work to like train AI models without permission. Um, we're seeing a lot of like also in like the news organization space, like asking or like they're issuing guidance around like allowing journalists to use AI for first drafts and like providing the final work as their own and like fact checking and all that. So I can't say enough that the importance of like human in the loop, right? And human oversight. So we talked a little bit about also in the hiring process, like employers are being reminded of just having the human in the loop so that existing anti-discrimination laws that I mentioned in the beginning of this topic area still apply. When using AI and like human oversight is really important to like avoid that legal liability. And I can't emphasize enough how the importance of AI ethics and governance roles. So like, we're seeing a shift where a lot of organizations are like hiring specialists to really navigate this like complex like legal landscape, right? So, recently, just in the past like 3 or 4 months, I've seen like an increase of like job postings around like AI governance, or privacy counsel for AI and AI ethics are becoming like more and more common. And I was recently like at a legal conference, and like the topic area of just like the expertise around getting understanding AI and the regulatory landscape. So I would like this is a hot topic for a lot of organizations because they want to implement AI into their business processes. But I would also say this is a hot topic from a regulatory landscape because it's so unknown and there's really just this I want to say I was going to say crazy, but an interesting patchwork across the board, right?
Yeah. The AI in employment is our last main topic, and I wanted to look, maybe there's some questions that are specific to the AI topic. Otherwise, we'll start closing the session and talk about the HR checklist. So let's look at the Q&A. I don't see anything specific. So hopefully we exhausted the curiosity with all the information that we've provided. It's definitely a fascinating topic, and there's so many nuances. Yeah, we are excited about this, and we are developing our own point of view and methodology to make sure that we are navigating this complex environment moving forward. Fantastic. Okay, so we would like to close our session off with and leave you guys with a list of general things we think we should be doing and thinking about. So, sort of summarizing the different points that Kalpita, Reem, myself mentioned throughout the session, we want to make sure that with the onset of the proactive audits, right, of I-9s and other related personal data, everybody really takes a close look at the audit process to ensure that we are prepared to pass it, right? We mentioned that we are seeing an uptick, probably triple the amount of the audits compared to previous year. So very important to look at the audit process and making sure that we are prepared to for the official audits when they come in. Very proactive approach to really understanding the wage and hour, the reviews of wage and hour, as well as the pay transparency compliance, right? Other important things that we have to emphasize, and we cannot emphasize enough how important it is, to really closely monitor federal, state, and local regulations. Reem, I think you probably will agree with this very strongly, that we have to pay attention to current court rulings, right? Everybody should work with their legal counsels and then look at the processes and compliance governance to make sure that everything reflects the current state of the regulations.
I would say if you're not best friends with your legal counsel, you should be, right? So you should be talking to them more frequently than you have previously, but really just making sure that they're monitoring it. And then you guys are sitting and thinking through like, what is the impact to our organization from an ops perspective? What do we need to be aware of?
Yeah. And lastly, I'm sure this was also apparent throughout the session today, investing in managers and supervisors, right? We need to make sure that they understand the relevant regulations and what is the impact of those regulations on your business, right? So we typically look at those roles as more tactical, but they are really, really strategic, right? They play a strategic role in how compliance is brought to business operations. So those are the main points and the checklist that we would love to offer to everybody. Okay, with this in mind, I still want to go back to see if there's any questions and answers, and if we've got time to address them. So like folks are, I think, satisfied with all the information that we provided.
No questions?
Fantastic.
6 minutes to do any questions.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box.
Awesome. While you're thinking about it, we are really, really thankful for the opportunity to talk about the workforce compliance and risk today, and for your participation. As a reminder, Pardavi, the recording will be shared shortly, right? Within a week, I believe.
Yes.
And then we also have on the screen the continuing education credit code.
Yes, we'll get
knows.
the recording and the PowerPoint presentation, the slides to everyone next week. If there are no questions, I want to really thank Kalpita, Reem, and Damien and Abel for taking the time today to share this information. It's really important food for thought, and there's just so much coming so quickly, so fast. It just reminds us we always have to be on top of everything all the time. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your knowledge. Just saw something come up, so I just want to check. Oh, this is very helpful. So the audience, the community agrees. This has been very helpful. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you to everyone in the community for being a part of today's call. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.